Hello at kaway-kaway kayo sa mga kakilala niyong tao dito. Please don't be shy. We now have around 100 people. We have a room of 1,000 na capacity. So please feel free to ask your other colleagues and your friends to come in because these last 2 days of sessions would be a lot of tips about Filipino employee well-being. So I'm going to start a little bit with just a few intro slides while we're waiting for the others to come in. So again, this is going to be the 2022 Filipino Employee Wellbeing Summit. Oh my God, Rak is here. Hi, Rak. Hello, nice to see you here. And Melanie Servo is also here. Oh my God. Hi, Melanie. Melanie is one of the people who's been following us, since we started doing all of these webinars. Pati si Rak din. It's so nice to see you both. I hope you can also say hi if you've been with us for quite a while, yung mga ating mga suking mga well-being champions and practitioners. So just to repeat, this is going to be the day 2 of the 2022 Filipino Employee Wellbeing Summit. So my name is John Baluyot and I'm the CEO and co-founder of Positive Workplaces, and I will be the moderator for this afternoon. As you remember and as you might know, we are doing this for a very important mission, and our mission is to co-create cultures that enhance the well-being of the Filipino workforce. Alam naman po namin na ang dami-dami po sa atin na pagod na, stress na, bad trip na sa minsan sa boss natin o kaya sa mga ka-opisina natin o sa trabaho natin, ganyan. Hindi po namin kayo i-invalidate kasi common po yan na experience that we are feeling, especially when there are a lot of expectations from us and we cannot cope with those expectations and the changes that are happening around. So this is our very important mission, and we are doing these free webinars for an important advocacy. Number one, because we want to help people to develop themselves first and understand different well-being tips and principles para ma-transfer nila sa iba at magawa nila eventually na capability for others to also be part of. So sabi nga po natin, we cannot pour out of an empty cup. So leading self is very, very important. And these free webinars that we're doing, this is an important element of educating people how to lead themselves first before they can eventually start leading others and the well-being of other people. So, pag mas magaling na kayo mag-lead ng ibang tao, magugulat kayo, you will also be very good now at leading cultures. Okay? And those cultures, those positive cultures, eventually translate into positive workplaces. So, just a few reminders, if hindi nyo na kita doon sa ating video sa waiting room, please have another device ready with you or be prepared to go to a link that we will share later. Kasi po, as you know naman in Positive Workplaces, mahilig po tayong magpag-gimmick through Mentimeter and other engagement activities. So please make sure that you are ready to participate kasi po nakakatuwa po pag nakakausap po namin kayo through your inputs. At hindi lang po lahat sa amin nanggagaling yung mga knowledge. Kasi alam po namin na kayo rin po may mga sobrang importanteng experience that you can share to all of us because this is our collective well-being as Filipino employees. You can also prepare a pen and paper just in case you want to take notes, and also just in case like the facilitators and the resource persons will have activities for you kasi we encourage engagement and audience participation in the chat box, as long as, of course, you are being respectful. Last reminder, and very important one po for everyone, alam po namin that a lot of you are also looking forward to getting your certificates of attendance. Very, very important points. Number one, please make sure that you are here until the end of the session kasi doon po namin i-share yung link ng post-evaluation. Okay? That's very important. Second, for those people who are watching in YouTube, please register to the Zoom room. Kasi doon namin sa Zoom chat i-share yung post-evaluation link. Marami pa po tayong room, marami pa po tayong seats. So don't worry. So please enter the Zoom room if you are in the YouTube page. So what you just have to do is when you fill out the evaluation form, make sure that you write your correct names and also write your correct email address. Huwag niyo pong isusulat yung excuse me. Huwag niyo pong isusulat yung pangalan ng facilitator. Sulat niyo po yung pangalan niyo doon sa name kasi po yun po yung lalabas doon sa certificate. Automatic po siya. So sa post evaluation po, 1 yung pinakamababa, 5 yung pinakamataas. All right? So hindi na po natin papatagalin. We are going to start our day 2 of the summit, yung 2022 Filipino Employee Wellbeing Summit. And just for everyone's information, this is going to be from 3 o'clock to 5 o'clock p.m. Okay? 1 hour would be for the session of Nikki and Kevin, where they will be talking about character, which is one of the domains of Filipino employee well-being based on our research. And then later on at 4 o'clock to 5 p.m., you will hear from Kay, and she will be the one to talk about connectedness naman, which is the second domain of Filipino employee well-being. All right? Before that, para po dun sa mga hindi naka-attend, just some refresh. So, last week, we discussed about how important well-being is to Filipinos. Alam po natin, napakamatiisin natin, no? Diba? So dahil sa sobrang matiisin natin, minsan tinatsaga na lang natin na indahin kung ano po yung mga dinadamdam natin sa opisina. So, pero minsan, wala bang audio? Can you hear me?
Yes, John, we can.
Alright. Hindi po maririnig, parang walang audio daw. Can you please say yes in the chat box if you can hear me? Alright. So baka po kailangan i-connect, for those people who can't hear me, baka po kailangan i-connect nyo yung inyong audio sa Zoom para po you can hear me po. Ayan. O kaya baka po may internet issue lang. Okay. Thank you so much po. Ayan. Maraming salamat po. Right now we discuss how important it is to take care of our well-being because konektado po yung well-being sa lahat. Diba? Sa ekonomiya, sa pamilya natin, sa mga katrabaho natin, at mas masaya na maginhawa ang iyong well-being. Sobrang redundant nun. Mas masaya na maginhawa ang inyong buhay habang tayo ay nagtatrabaho, di po ba? So yan po yung isang pinaka-importanting rason kung bakit po tayo gumawa ng Employee Wellbeing Report. So yung Employee Wellbeing Report po na yon, meron pong 5 key items. Na lumabas po na 44% of respondents believe that they are not adequately compensated for the work that they do. 39% of respondents are unable to maintain a healthy lifestyle. 49% of survey respondents stated that they have difficulty keeping up with the demands of their work. 68% of survey respondents find the work that they do repetitive. And 39% of survey respondents state that their workplace negatively impacts their health. All right? So ito po yung mga key items na lumabas dun sa study na ginawa namin with Filipino employees. Address ko lang po yung nasa chat box, no? For those of you who are having audio issues, repeat ko po yung advice ni Gabby, no? Please click yung connect to audio or join audio in Zoom. Or you can also try to re-enter. You can also try to re-enter the room. This is weird because you may not hear what I'm saying. So can someone from our team please just advise them in the chat box what to do? Kasi there are some people who don't have audio, some people who have audio. So yeah, please try to re-enter if you can hear. Or yeah. Okay. The other part of the employee well-being report is the 4 domains of Filipino employee well-being that we discussed, which is character, contentment, and connectedness. So before we officially start with this part of the session, I would like to ask you, for those people last week, no, who were part of the session, ano po yung pinaka sa tingin nyo na i-apply nyo or mai-a-apply nyo from last week's session? Nung nag-discuss tayo ng domains of employee well-being, you can put it in the chat box. And for those people naman who are joining the first time, ano po yung gusto nyong matutunan? Bakit po kayo nandito sa session na to? So please feel free to add them in the chat box or to chat your responses in the chat box. Diba? Para po makita po natin kung ano yung connection nyo doon po sa ating topic today. Right? And while you are doing that, while you're encoding your responses, I would like to introduce our resource speakers, Nikki and Kevin. So I want to start with Kevin. So Kevin finds joy in serving the Filipino people by empowering development practitioners and business professionals to succeed in the work that they do. He learns new things daily and views work as a playground to try new things, fail forward fast, and design humane experiences by iteration. Before becoming a freelance consultant, he worked for 7+ years in the civil service, spending the past 5 years as the HR head and strategy management officer of the office of the former Vice President, Lenny Robredo. So hello, Kevin.
Hello, good afternoon everyone. Magandang hapon po.
Ayan. So Kevin is going to be one of our resource speakers today on the topic, the strengths in character for organizational performance. Thanks, Kevin. And then, of course, we have Nikki Vergara. So Nikki is one of the co-founders of Positive Workplaces. She is a graduate of Masters of Applied Positive Psychology from the University of Melbourne. She has worked with the educational sector through the DepEd. She has also worked with Happy Education Labs, and she has very thick experience in learning design and now on organizational well-being design. So without further ado, let me get to you, Nikki Vergara.
Hi, everyone. It's so nice to see you all in this webinar.
Yay! So later on, we will have the next topic through Kay Vardelion. I'll introduce her also, but I'm now going to transfer the slides to Nikki and Kevin so they can start their part on the topic, the strength in character for organizational performance.
Yes, thanks so much. So last time, if you were in that webinar, do a recap lang, we did this research. What are the key components of Filipino employee well-being? So we've searched through hundreds of related literature, studying the research. We wrote 200 items initially, trying to measure Filipino employee well-being until we synthesized it and eventually did our study. And we found out that through our very rigorous statistical analysis, we found out that there are 4 key areas for Filipino employee well-being. There's character, which Kevin and I will tackle today. It's the psychological well-being and the experience of positive emotions. Yung career, it's the well-being that is very specific to the workplace. Like, kamusta ka yung relationship with your boss? How is your relationship with your colleagues? And contentment is also very important. If you heard from Monica and Kurt last time na at the very basic of our needs, our basic life needs, like basic needs, being able to feed yourself, having shelter, physiological needs, those are all measured in contentment. And lastly, this was a domain that actually surprised us. We found that for Filipino employee well-being, it was very key to have a good relationship with people you consider family, to feel a sense of purpose, to feel a connection to a higher power or your spirituality. This was very unique to Filipino employee well-being that we didn't really find in other contexts in other countries. So that one, Kay will talk more about later. But in these 4 domains, all of these affect your well-being at work. Sometimes we'd like to think, hindi ba ginawa ko na lahat in the workplace context to improve people's well-being? Pero how you experience life, like your well-being outside of work, your connections with your family, your state of living, they all affect your well-being at work. It's not like we go to work and we hang who ourselves, like we sinasabit natin sa pinto kung sino tayo before entering. We bring who we are completely into who we are at work as well. And that's why it's so important that we're concerned about building these 4 domains. For what Kevin and I will tackle today, it's character. So this is gonna be our learning roadmap. First, we'll talk about why is it so important to focus on the whole person. Can I not just relate to you as a worker in the workplace? And then we'll talk about what interventions we can do to improve that character domain of Filipino employee well-being. And Kevin and I will discuss practical steps on how you can do that. On an individual level, let's say you want to work on your character well-being domain as an individual, or maybe you want to think of ways to improve that if you are a manager or as an organization. So first, we'll discuss why is it important to focus on the whole person. So sometimes we get very, there's a distinction. Sometimes we're very transactional, meaning I'll do this for you because there are certain work outcomes that's important. O kaya, but then there are instances na our relationships are more defined by being relational. Yung I care for you as a whole person. So I want to ask you, what are signs of a transactional work relationship? You can scan the QR code on the screen or click on the link that we will be posting on the chat box. And I want to ask you, Kevin, for you, can you share with me, ano ba yung mga signs for you of a transactional work relationship?
Yeah, so thanks, Nikki. For me, pagka-transactional yung work relationship, hindi man lang nag-hi, parang di ba usually, hi, Kevin, or hi, Nikki, di ba? Parang diretso na, napasa mo na ba yung, yung requirement? Diretso ka na kaagad dun sa kailangan, which gets naman, di ba? Because we're in a work setting, it's important to get things done. But sometimes, it feels off, especially if you know alam mo yung parang stress na nga yung lahat. Tapos instead of trying to make a positive or a healthy work relationship, it feels sometimes na I'm a robot na if you need something, you press this button, then I should immediately respond. And I think another one would be sometimes kapag ka nabigay mo na yung kailangan nila, mag-iisip na sila ano pa yung bagong hihingin nila instead of saying thank you or instead of acknowledging your work. So yan, sometimes it gets frustrating, especially if it's a very tense situation. And alam ko marami sa atin ngayon baka nandun sa phase na yon since December, yung mga naghahabol ng end of year requirements. So that's a challenge for me. And I really don't like when I feel that it's just a transactional work relationship.
Yeah, and to add to that, Kevin, some people are saying here din yung parang very task-oriented lang yung conversations. Wala man lang pangangamusta or wala man lang good morning or how are you? You're just very like treating each other as machines, as resources. Walang sincerity sa conversation, very objective. Or very task-oriented yung employees. Wala nang focus or area for growth sa relationships. The tasks could be very routinary. You only talk about business. Very routine siya. Yung what's expected of you from the office or basically isang tanong, isang sagot. You also sometimes behave opportunistically is what's being shared here. I'll share with you another research that I found very interesting. Yung they found that when people feel that they are giving a lot to the work, tapos hindi sila nako-compensate for it properly. Syempre, a transactional way of doing things is like, oh sige, pinagod nyo ako, babawiin ko to sa tissue paper, babawiin ko to sa free alcohol. Actually, hindi siya free eh. Panggamit siya dapat sa work, pero inuuwi siya ng mga tao because there's a transactional work relationship na pinagod mo ako, babawiin ko yan sa'yo. So it goes both ways, to us, to our colleagues, from our employers to us, and to us to our employers. But now I want to ask everyone, what are ways to have a humane interaction instead? Because a big part of employee well-being is just the general well-being of a person. And sometimes we tend to forget na tao yung mga katrabaho natin. So for you, Kevin, what's one way for you to have a humane interaction instead?
I think yung pinaka tumatak sa akin in having humane interactions is that there's really, you feel that they pay attention to you, not
Yeah.
just because they need something. Yes, they need something to you and you have to deliver it to them. But more than that, they see that you're a person. And this can be something as simple as when they talk to you, they look you in the eye, they make an effort to smile, or nakikiramdam sila kung nasaan ako. So I have those situations na, for example, I remember in Ateneo, pag may isang photocopy lady doon, si Ate Alma, na every time magpapa-photocopy ako sa kanya, she would always make me feel welcome. And even if there's like 10 people who are cramming their requirements, she tries her best to look everyone in the eye, make you feel seen, make you feel heard, and make you feel valued. So I think that we're not saying that pag humane interaction, wala ka ng work responsibility involved. No? It's still within a work setting, may ganun pa ring element na may kailangan ma-deliver. But at the same time, you're not being treated as though you were a robot or a vending machine na pag pinindot mo, lalabas yung output.
Yes, exactly. Si Ate Alma, kilala ko rin siya. She's quite well known in Ateneo for being such a pleasant person to interact with. Even if in charge siya sa photocopying, you really feel parang she cares about you as a human being. So here are some things that other people are saying as well. Yung magkaroon naman ng active listening, relational communication, kamustahan, having respect and empathy. Remember little things from your interactions. Yeah, isn't that something that makes you feel so seen and heard, na those little subtle things naaalala ng tao and they are able to bring that back to your conversations. Being sincere, I love this, like really showing recognition and appreciation to your employees. Sometimes kasi pwede mong isipin, kailangan ba ko bang mag-thank you? Binabayaran naman silang lahat. But actually, this is something that makes your workplace just a more humane place when you show recognition and appreciation for the things that people do. Kung merong check-up, not necessarily work-related, but can simply be about how their day is going. Something I really appreciate in positive workplaces is if meron akong pinanghuhugutan in my personal life or something is happening to me, that is actually something that I can bring up to my co-leaders, for instance, like John and Gio, who do their best talaga to support me, especially when I need extra help around leadership decisions, ganyan. So people here are also saying having humane interaction happens when the transaction goes beyond the services requested, considering the situations of both the client and the service giver may be experiencing. So really enhancing that employee experience and that customer experience that goes beyond the simple service or transaction that was initially what the business was built around. So those are really great examples, everyone. Thank you for sharing that. So this is what I always tell people in positive workplaces. I think yung malaking pinaghuhugutan ko is that human resources, before they are treated as resources, are first human. And hindi dapat nawawala yung human care, human dignity, and how we treat each other. And in fact, I want to share with you a story that I have not shared with many people, even in positive workplaces or my close friends. And I did ask permission from this person if I could share this story. So as a teacher before, that was my first ever job. I was teaching. And I guess there is a trigger warning in this story. At one point in the year, my student attempted to kill himself, and I was the one who I asked him. Luckily, he was saved, but I did ask him why. What was going through his mind when he decided to do that? He tied a rope around his neck, and I could still see the rope burns when I was speaking to him. And then he told me, kasi he's failing at school, he lost a significant relationship, and he was just having a hard time altogether, feeling niya pabigat lang siya sa mundo. And what I told him was, you don't have to do anything or be anyone to be worthy of love. You'll always be worthy of love just as you are. And just the same, everyone in our workplace deserves well-being, or their well-being should be taken into consideration just as they are. We don't give well-being only to the high performers. We give well-being to everyone. Everyone deserves that treatment, that respect for human dignity. Actually wrote a short story around this over the pandemic, and I'll share that with you. So I want to ask you, do you see yourself as a commodity sometimes? What are signs of you seeing yourself as a commodity? It could be yung parang you only think that you are worthy if you are performing well at work. O kaya anytime you feel that you're not reaching your standards, you feel useless as a person. That is you treating yourself as a commodity. How about you, Kevin? Did you ever see yourself as a commodity at work?
Yeah, bigla ako na nag-flashback sa akin yung yung old mindset ko about myself na my worth is tied to my productivity. Parang if I wasn't able to perform, not
Yeah.
even to meet the standards of other people, but more of performing to the standards that I set for myself, which were at times very unreasonable or very parang imposible mo na magawa yun. But
Yeah.
so I felt that I think that also ties into this feeling na we get hurt so much when someone gives feedback about our work because we attribute our self-worth to the value of our work, which is it to some extent feeling ko naman natural siya kasi pinaghirapan mo yun, nagbigay parang lahat binuhos mo talaga yung sarili mo dun sa ginagawa mo, so mahalaga siya sa'yo. But having that discipline of separating, while my work is important, it's a manifestation of who I am. It is
Yeah.
not me. And setting that boundary helps me to remember na yun nga, I'm not just a resource, even if
Yeah.
I'm a good resource, no, I'm more than that. So babalik ka pa rin na even if I don't perform, no, even if I don't have a job actually, no, I am still valuable dahil tao ako.
I hope that's something everyone can take away from this hour, no? Na yung sabi ni Kevin na even if you don't perform, it's okay, tao ka, you are not just a resource. I think that's a statement I want to embed in everyone. You're not just a resource. So people here said, actually, 23% would say they frequently see themselves as a commodity. 67% said sometimes, and I think that's still a lot of times. Yung 11%, proud of you. Maybe you had this epiphany just like Kevin did na now you rarely see that. Actually, my part 2 yung kwento ko. In the next year, when I was teaching in a very difficult context, tapos hindi ko naaabot yung targets ko or what I was expecting of myself, what I hoped for my students, I just felt so useless. And I was really disappointed. Parang I was questioning my entire existence. If I could not teach, then who am I? May say pa ba yung buhay ko? And I received a phone call. Parang randomly, an unknown number was calling me, and I usually don't answer unknown numbers. But at that moment that I was so lost, I did. And to my surprise, it was my student. Yung student na nakausap ko before. And actually, sabi niya sa akin, naalala mo pa ba yung sinabi mo sa akin dati? And it just really hit me na the things that I said to him before na you don't have to do anything or be anyone to be worthy of success, to be worthy of love. You'll always be worthy of love. when he said that, I realized, okay, now it's my time to learn that lesson from him. It was his time to be my teacher for learning that lesson. And I hope that's a lesson that we get to share with all of you here. I wrote it, here's benefits of focusing on the whole person. It actually increases employees' productivity. To just not treat someone as a commodity, as a resource, will eventually boost their productivity. It will increase the job satisfaction, and it will recognize, it is something that recognizes the employee's need for self-fulfillment. We all have this need for self-fulfillment, and a base foundation of that is being seen as a whole person. And it also helps them feel that they are more than just resources. I think this is actually embedded in us when we are young. I wrote a little story, parang just to make the heavy story that I felt as my student a little bit more digestible. I wrote a little story na parang, okay, for many people, being loved is such a nice feeling. Especially when we were kids, diba? Parang, oh, it's so nice to be loved. So we wonder, what can we do to be loved? What do I need to do so that I can be loved by others? And that's when we start thinking about, oh, parang maybe I should be funny. Maybe I should get high grades. Maybe I should be a superhero. Maybe I should make good food or share my toys or win competitions. But I think the important thing to know is, like, it's good to do your best. It's good to be kind. It's good to make contributions to the world. But at the end of the day, you don't have to do anything or to be anyone. You'll always be worthy of being loved, and that having well-being, you'll always be worthy of that regardless of anything. So we want to share with you what are some interventions you can do to improve overall psychological well-being, how to improve that character domain. So we have 4 tips for you. I'll share the first 2 tips on strengths and hope, and Kevin will talk about creating psychological safety and mentorship in the workplace. So how? The first tip I have for you is to actually apply your strengths. Think about your highest goal and its application in your different roles. Typically, when I give talks on strengths, I always focus it on the work setup, but I want you to think about it as it applies to your whole life. So what are strengths? For many of you who have seen our other webinars, I will always bring this back because it's always a good reminder. We all have strengths, and these are strong neural connections. This is where our advantages are. Lahat tayo may strengths at lahat tayo iba-iba at unique ang ating mga strengths. So it's no good to compare yourself to another person. You have your unique set of strengths. Before I went on a strengths journey, I always just focused on the worst parts of who I am or things that I didn't like about myself. So here's mine. I didn't like asserting myself in front of a group. If you know me well, you'd know that I'm quite shy. Another thing is I get really emotional, and I sometimes wish that I was more objective. So I was always telling myself, Nikki, you have to work on these low aspects of who you are, these things that you don't like about yourself. You have to improve these weaknesses. So I spent a bulk of my life just trying to address these low points, trying to fix my weaknesses. But then, all I'd ever end up doing was to kind of make myself well-rounded. Kasi yung weakness mo, parang tinatry mong itapat siya sa yung strength. That takes a lot of work. Something that you could do instead is focus on the best parts of who you are. Yes, work on your weaknesses, but put majority of your effort, your attention into focusing on the best of who you are and stretching it from there. So I learned na, okay, you know what? It's okay na I'm not good at big groups. Something that I'm really good at is having good one-on-one conversations with people. So if I want to influence others, that's my way to go, to have that direct one-on-one conversation. And maybe I'm not the most objective person who focuses on metrics all the time, but I am really good at sensing the feelings of other people. And in that way, I can leverage my my empathy in being a good leader. Si John yung magaling sa metrics. So when I can, I assign that area to him. So my life has dramatically changed when I focused on my strengths instead. When you use your strengths, you'll excel, your work becomes easier, your task is more enjoyable, and you're more energized in your life. And there will always be so many clues to your strengths, like what you enjoy doing, what you do well, what interests, excites, and energizes you. Happiness will happen when you use your strengths frequently, but you will be able to live a meaningful life if you use your strengths in the service of something bigger than yourself. So I want for you to focus on not just the work setting in this moment, but overall, what is your big goal in life? So, and try to fill this table out. I'll give you 2 minutes to fill this table out while I share with you some of my ideas from my table. So for me in life, I have been many things. I have been a teacher, I've been a daughter, a friend, executive assistant, trainer, to well-being officer. I've been many things, but across the many things and the many roles that I have in life, there's always a big underlying goal for me, and that is to create moments of healing. So if you know who you really are, if you know what purpose you're trying to serve in this world, or what value you want to offer other people, try to reflect on that and write it down. And next, think about the many roles that you have. Your role usually is not just your work role. Minsan, if we think about role, we'll just think about it in the context of work. But it's important to care for our well-being in general. And think about your many roles. It could be your work role. It could be your role outside work. Are you a friend? Are you a partner? Are you a daughter? And then I encourage you to think about your strengths. So there's many ways that you can think about your strengths. There's formal assessments, but I think in this moment, you can also think about what are the things that you've done really well in your life, or what are the areas that people have spotted that you really shine at. And link that to some behaviors or actions that you can do. So for instance, I'm a well-being officer in positive workplaces. Siguro I'll focus on this second area na lang. One of my strengths is developer. Siguro that's why I like teaching. I love scaffolding learning experiences. I love helping people reach their full potential. So how can I reach my goal through this role and through this strength? What I decided to do is to actually design webinars that inform and inspire people to take care of their well-being, such as this one or the many ones that I've done before. But I also want to emphasize to everyone here na you're not just your work role. So I think for me, I would live an inauthentic life if I have this goal, but I only applied it in my work role. It's important to also live authentically by living life with that goal in the other roles that you serve. And that's why for me, like as a friend, it's really important na like one of my strengths is relator. I'm good at one-on-one and forming deep connections with people. So something that I should also neglect is who I am as a friend. I know making webinars is important, but sometimes I do really carve out time for people I care about, like my friends, to offer to listen to them, to have one-on-one conversations with them. So mahalaga that when you think about your goal in life, you don't think about just your role at work, but also think about your role in the different relationships that you have, in the different areas of life that you move in. And another suggestion that I have is plan with your best possible self in mind. So in this moment, I actually want to invite you to close your eyes if you're comfortable and just focus on your breath. I will give you prompts and let's see if an imagery or a visual will come to mind. I want you to think about your best possible self over the next 5 years. Imagine that things have gone as well as it possibly could. You've worked hard and you succeeded at accomplishing your goals. Try to take a picture of what would your work look like? What would be the purpose of your work? What would be the processes that you're doing at work? What would your work relationships look like? And now I invite you to take a snapshot of other areas of your life. What would your family life look like? What emotions would you be feeling when you are at this state of your best possible self in 5 years? Who are the people you are supporting? What advocacies would you be supporting? You can take a snapshot of that, write it down, keep it in memory. You can even draw it on your paper right now. Don't lose that best possible self, because sometimes you can open your eyes now and focus on the screen again. Sometimes when we think about who will be, ang dami nating limits and constraints. We have so many self-imposed limits of hanggang dito lang yata yung kaya ko, or konti lang yung resources ko, kaya ito lang yung pwede kong gawin. I did this exercise as part of my Master's in Applied Positive Psychology homework. And this is actually the exercise that allowed me to think of where I am right now. When I did this exercise, I was really thinking, oh, this is going to be, parang I was really thinking, I want to be a consultant. I want to spread the message of well-being everywhere. But I know meron akong constraints. A part of me was thinking, oh gosh, but I've only ever been in the education sector. I have no consulting experience prior to building positive workplaces. So there are many times when we put a cap to our dreams, we put limits to who we can be or to what we could achieve, because we're trying to protect ourselves. In a way, we limit what we can do. But when I did this intervention, regardless of the constraints that I was seeing, I saw my best possible self, and I wanted to reach that best possible self. So I did so many things. Like, for instance, in approach ko si John, who was my friend in Melbourne, and I just said, hey, John, do you ever want to work together? Maybe someday when we go back, do you think we could work together? I approached him in a bus, and little did I know that John would be super on board. But that's the power of this evidence-based positive psychology intervention, the best possible self exercise. It allows you to believe that the future is possible. And when you think that it is possible, you'll be more optimistic. And when you're more optimistic, you will actually be more mindful of opportunities rather than the constraints that align to that best possible self. And when you are more mindful of those opportunities, you start to take the steps towards reaching that future. So if you want to take a screenshot of this, go for it. I highly encourage you to do this exercise. How I did this exercise as my homework was every day, pagkagising ko, I will just imagine my best possible self. And they encourage automatic writing, meaning sulat ka lang ng sulat. Do not stop yourself. Kung ano mang lumabas dyan, just allow it to unfold and to unravel. So I did this every morning for a week. And that best possible self that I saw while I was taking my master's is actually who I am today. And I don't think I would be able to stretch my vision of who I am without doing this exercise. So this is something that you can do for yourself as well. Sometimes when we think about what is the next thing for me, we just look at, oh, ano na ba yung promotion sa akin sa workplace? O ano kaya yung maabot ng credentials ko? But if you try to dream with no constraints, no limits, so many things are possible. So that's another tip that I have for you that you could do as an individual. And of course, I don't want to neglect na it's so important to have hope. So when you have a big goal, try to think about not just one strategy, but numerous strategies to get there. Let me find that slide. So think about a strategy A, a strategy B, a strategy C, so that even as you put your heart towards one strategy, if ever you find a block somewhere there, you will have other strategies to be able to overcome those blocks. And if your goal is really meaningful to you, this would really help. So now I'll turn you over to Kevin.
Okay, so hi everyone, good afternoon. Sa mga kasama natin sa chat, may nakita ko, Nikki, pinaiyak mo na. Ayan, so thank you so much, Nikki, for sharing. Yeah, that that exercise would seem very simple, but actually, it's in my own story. Ang part niyan I had to shed things that were keeping me from fulfilling my best possible self. And ito yung mararanasan natin. Actually, a lot of the things that keep us where we are self-imposed. It's not actually things that are being imposed on us by other people. So yeah, I encourage everyone to do this activity because it will really help you. But at the same time, I also want to acknowledge the how is it possible that the workplaces or the organizations that you're part of, so it could be where you're actually working right now, it could be organizations that you're part of, whether it's an extracurricular, a community organization, where you do your volunteer work, a religious organization, wherever. No? Um, kasi yung challenge ng pag-imagine ng best possible self natin, it has to be supported by institutions that help us so that those dreams of ours can become a reality. So here, I'll focus more on my experience as an HR practitioner in terms of what if no, yung workplace natin or our organizations were intentional in creating safe and developmental spaces that help us grow, that help us basically achieve yung best possible self that we envision. Next slide. Okay. So organizations that intentionally build character are, I would describe them in two ways. They are safe and they are developmental. Next. So when we talk about safety, of course, there has to be this element of physical safety. I think the pandemic really made this very top of mind. No, a lot of doon natin nakita ay kailangan pala safe yung organization or yung workplace that we're working in because it not only affects our work, our productivity, but dito na nakikita natin actually mahalaga pala siya sa atin, which is siguro before the pandemic, it was something that we took for granted. At least on my end, that's my experience. But in addition to physical safety, there's also this idea that our workplaces should have psychological safety. And makikita nyo dito na psychological safety is important because it actually addresses both the idea of safety, no? We're safe in the workplace, but at the same time, this whole concept or idea of psychological safety is very important in being an intentionally developmental work. And later on, we'll discuss further about that. But finally, the developmental side, no, kailangan may intentionality in terms of being growth-oriented. Hindi sapat na, okay, nagbibigay ng pa-training, no, nakakausap ko yung boss ko, na automatic developmental na agad yung organization natin. There has to be intentionality, and this is a word that I'll keep coming back to. There has to be a vision and a prioritization of what do we want to develop in the first place. Okay. But before that, let's focus on some questions first. No? So next slide. So let's do a quick test for everyone. So right now, we're presenting some characteristics and I want you to assess how safe and accessible is your workplace. So in the whole concept of safety, sinasama ko dito yung concept ng accessible. Kasi hindi lang sapat na yung mismong workplace nyo ay ligtas, but yung papunta at pauwi mula dun sa inyong workplace ay ligtas din. So, meron tayong 5 characteristics here. So, in the chat box, just type if you were to score your workplace, ilan dyan sa 5 items na yan ang matidescribe mo yung workplace? So, yung areas in the workplace, maganda ba yung ilaw? Hindi ka ba natatakot umuwi ng late mula sa work? Madali ba ang pag-commute to, papunta at pauwi ng work? Meron bang mga bike racks, showers, reasonable accommodations for active commuters? Especially during the pandemic, we saw the rise of active commuting, so bikes, electronic scooters, etc. No? Actually, sa Pilipinas, we're late in terms of adopting these things, but in other countries, it's actually very normal to bike to work. And then finally, sa mga kasama natin na merong mobility disabilities, no? Because when we talk about people with disabilities, there are multiple types. So for example, are there facilities that are available? For example, ramps, wheelchairs, elevators, and so on and so forth. Okay, so interesting po yung nakikita natin, no, sa ating chat box. Natutuwa ako na natatawa din dun sa isa na unang sumagot, 5 kasi work from home. So nakita natin actually, si Nikki pala yun, nakita natin actually because of the pandemic, we saw that this is an alternative modality at work. And syempre, depende sa organization natin, iba-iba yung nagiging setup natin ngayon. But of course, we have to still check, no? How many of these things, how safe and accessible ba yung workplace natin? Okay, so next, please. Yan, so we have another 5 questions, no? So let's just call them 6 to 10. So dito sa 5 items na to, alin dito ang masasabi nyo na nag-a-apply sa inyong workplace? So are they well ventilated, no? Are they ergonomic? Are there protocols to prevent the spread of COVID? Are there protocols in place for disasters, fire, earthquake, etc.? Are there facilities present that reduce barriers for people with visual, speaking, or hearing disability? Actually, dito sa whole concept of safety, pinapasok ko na in some form yung idea ng access, ng diversity, and ng inclusion. Because, yes, occupational safety, that's also part of it, no? I think the challenge, especially for a lot of HR and OD practitioners, na parang sinesegment natin, na meron kang diversity and inclusion, meron kang occupational health and safety. In the public sector, may separate guidelines on mental health, may separate guidelines on public health. So what I'm trying to do here is, okay, what if we try to approach this holistically? Dahil bilang tao, yung iba't ibang aspeto na to nakaka-apekto sa ating kaligtasan, sa ating kasiyahan, at sa ating productivity. So marami pong salamat sa mga nagsagot sa chat. So I hope that we can raise these things if hindi pa tayo 5 for both of them so that we could further improve the physical aspects of our work. And now we turn to the second idea of being psychological safe sa ating work. In a nutshell, no, very simple, when we say that our workplace is psychologically safe, ito yung pwede nating ibahagi yung mga naiisip natin, yung mga nararamdaman natin, yung mga ideya natin. Pwede tayong magtanong, magbigay ng suggestion, or even challenge, no, the things that are being raised in our workplace. Na hindi tayo natatakot na mapapahiya tayo, mapapagalitan tayo, mahuhusgahan tayo. Nikki, next please. So these are some things, no, that you can think of. Kapag ba nagsasalita kayo in the workplace, pakiramdam nyo ba na hindi kayo huhusgahan? Kapag ba pumasok kayo sa workplace, hindi nyo kailangan mag-code switch. When we say code switch, ay yung mga kasama ko, English speaking silang lahat. Pagka nagsalita ako ng Tagalog or ng Bisaya or kung ano man yung language na ginagamit ko, baka isipin nila hindi ako matalino. Or the way that I dress myself, no, I have to para makibagay sa kung ano yung majority. Kasi kung hindi ko gawin yun, hindi nila ako tatanggapin. In other words, I have to be someone who I am not in order to be accepted. If that's something that you regularly feel in your workplace, then ibig sabihin wala pa tayo dun sa level ng psychological safety that we want. And flipping this, no, a psychologically safe workplace is one wherein we are willing to take risks, no? Willing akong mag-risk dahil hindi ako natatakot makatanggap ng feedback mula sa aking boss, mula sa aking supervisor, or kahit mula sa mga customers, no? At mahirap to. Hindi tayo natatakot dahil nauunawaan natin na when someone gives feedback, they are not giving feedback because they want to degrade my person. Hindi nila ako gustong ipahiya kaya sila nagbibigay ng comment. Kung positive comment kasi madaling tanggapin. Pero paano kung negative comment? Maho-hurt ba ako? Oo, I think hindi naman mawawala yung aspect na maho-hurt tayo. But at the same time, if psychologically safe yung workplace natin, we're able to establish this distance. That what they're giving feedback to is something that I did. They're not giving feedback to my personality, to my person. At nauunawaan ko na saan ba nanggagaling yung feedback na ito. They're not coming from a place that wants to put me down. Instead, they're coming from a good place that wants to raise me up. They're giving feedback because they want me to be better the next time that I do whatever it is that they are giving feedback about. So if our workplace is something like this, then we could celebrate, we feel happier, we are more, ano ba yung other term for risk-taking? We're more innovative kasi hindi tayo natatakot na magkamali. Dahil nauunawaan natin na yung feeling, no, yung tinatawag kong feeling forward is a process of doing something, learning from it, and then improving. At paulit-ulit yan. And yung journey natin towards our best self actually involves this iterative process. So that's the second aspect of unintentionally safe and an organization that intentionally tries to build character. It is physically safe, it is psychologically safe, and then dun sa last part, no, itong question ng development, and I know that for a lot of managers especially, this is a big challenge. And I would like to pose the question of development, professional development in the workplace in terms of this question. First things first, ano ba yung staff development philosophy ng inyong organization? Meron ba kayo nito? Or kung wala, you can observe this more or less in terms of how you give out opportunities to your staff. Next. So let me share ano yung animating spirit or philosophy or vision, no, in terms of how we approach staff development at the Office of VP Lenny noong 2016 up to 2022. Nagsimula kami sa recognition na sa totoo lang, hindi naman lahat ng empleyadong pumasok sa amin ay magsistay doon. No? Kasi I think a lot of organizations have this idea na bakit ako mag-i-invest sa isang tao kung aalis pala siya. And that's a valid point. But for us, we started with that recognition. Iba-iba yung career choices at plans ng bawat staff dahil iba-iba sila ng pinanggagalingan sa buhay. But there was a clear unifying vision. Regardless of those staff's plans, isa lang yung pangarap natin para sa bawat empleyado. Lahat sila ay maging matino at mahusay. As simple as that. And so, next please. Ito yung laging sinasabi ni Ma'am before, si Ma'am meaning VP Lenny. Gusto natin na saan man pumunta yung ating mga empleyado, so whether they stay in the OVP, they move elsewhere, or they go back to school, no? Saan man sila pumunta, ang sasabihin ng mga tao, taga-OVP yan, mahusay yan. They carried within them the brand of the organization na lahat ng taong naging staff dito, matino at mahusay. At dala-dala nila yon saan man sila pupunta. And another thing, no, this one naman is always being shared by our Assistant Chief of Staff. And it's still consistent with this whole animating spirit. Next, please. Alam mo yung feeling na pag meron kayong ka-meeting or may event, tas may biglang grupo ng tao na papasok. No? Maglalakad sila sama-sama, parang boy band, gano'n eh. No? Hindi mo malalaman sino sa kanila yung may position. Hindi mo malalaman na kunyari may 5 taong pumasok, usually masabi mo, ay yung gitna, yung nasa gitna, siya yung boss kasi iba yung itsura niya, iba yung forma niya, tapos lahat parang ina-accommodate siya. Our vision for our staff was, hindi mo malalaman actually pag pumasok yung 5 tao, sino ba dyan yung may pinakamataas na posisyon. Bakit? Simple lang. Next please. Lahat kasi sila leader. Lahat ng 5 taong maglalakad dun sa kwarto, lahat sila leader, lahat sila magaling, lahat sila mahusay, lahat sila matino. At dito kami bumabalik dun sa ideya na leadership, it's not about position. It's about the disposition. So, what is the disposition of all of our staff? And their disposition, what you were trying to promote, was everyone had this disposition to be the best version of themselves. And this brings us, thank you Ma'am Lindo, sa inyong share. Hindi po kayo ready maging emotional. But yes, it is perfectly possible to have organizations like this. And I hope that after these talks, we can bring this back to our organizations. Now, pupunta tayo sa major challenge ng lahat ng organizations. Ito yung ating mentorship dilemma, no? Lalo kung private organization tayo, no? We are usually a mindset, learning and development is an expense center. Gastos yan. Bakit ko yan gagawin? How do I get the return on investment? And how I frame this is your mentorship, your learning and development, you can treat this as a black box. Black box kasi may mangyayari dyan, pero hindi ka sigurado anong mangyayari as a result. And when we talk about the developmental black box, this is always 2 things. May professional development ka, but you also have personal development. And the ultimate question is, kung gawin ko to, will they stay or will they go? No, that's always the challenge. And for me, this is based or anchored on the culture that is present in the organization, what I would refer to as the cultural intangibles. These are the decision factors that come into play aside from competitive pay. Hindi natin tinatanggal yung usapin ng sahod at ng compensation dahil alam natin mahalaga yon, practical yon. Pero more than that, there are people who are willing to take a pay cut because of certain cultural intangibles. And this is something I observed in our organizations. Ano ba yung considerations nila? Bakit kahit technically pag natanggap nila yung certification or yung training, pwede sila lumipat at triple yung sahod nila. But some of them choose not. Why? They come back to the identity of the organization. Sino ba yung pinaglilingkuran ng OVP? That was a big factor. No? Second, sino ba yung aming principal? VP Lenny. Ano ba yung nabibigay niya sa akin? It's not financial actually, but working for one person that you believe in gives you hope and gives you inspiration. And for some, that is worth more than temporary financial gains. And then finally, ano ba yung pakiramdam ko working in this company, working in this organization? Because it is a very demanding type of work. Pero bakit tayo nagtataya ng ating sarili? 1, we believe in the vision. 2, we are inspired and hopeful because of our principal. And 3rd, because we know and feel that we are being cared for in this organization. It may not be perfect, and definitely it's difficult to find an organization that checks out all these 3 boxes. But these are some of the considerations that try and help answer the question, will they stay or will they go? And finally, I would like to describe the different types of values that we gain because of this developmental black box. This is the most common. May value siya bilang empleyado. Pangalawa, meron siyang value bilang future partner. Yung first na value as employee, okay, kaya kita tinitrain na gawin itong bagay na to kasi kailangan ko na upskilled ka, you have the skills to deliver what you need to deliver. Very practical. The return on investment is, I train you to do X so you can do Y. And after the training, you can do Y. So I get my return on investment. But, paano kung aalis na yung tao? You can also think of this instrumentally. For example, umalis na ako dun sa dati kong company, but my previous companies can now engage me as a service provider. or the networks, the friendships that we built allow them to have access to future business opportunities. This is important, especially when you do career transitions, that you don't burn bridges. Because if you have good working relationships, even after you leave the organization, it could still be a win-win for both of you. But ultimately, ang in-emphasize pa rin dito is instrumental. Why am I doing this? Because I want something in return, whether now or in the future. But in addition to that, and dito kami bumabalik palagi, yes, there are instrumental values that we gain, but babalik tayo. Human resource, the word human always comes first. And we're giving you these developmental opportunities because we value you as a person. No? Now, regardless if the organization derives some form of benefit or income from it, kasi mahalaga ka sa amin, kaya we want you to be the best version of yourselves. That's why we'll be sharing these opportunities for you. And personally, I think I was very fortunate because in all of the different companies I worked for, I had good mentors that gave me these opportunities, not just because of the instrumental value, but because of the intrinsic value. They saw something in me and they wanted me to be the best version of myself. And now, yung nakikita ko, no, ano ba yung best version of myself? Why am I doing what I'm doing right now? Because I want to share that love of learning to as many people as I can and pay forward what I received from the different mentors that I have, that I had and actually still have. Because yun yung pinakamasaya dito eh. Yung mga mentors ko dati, hindi ko na sila boss ngayon kasi nga, I'm working independently right now, but I'm still able to approach them and ask them for advice for both personal and professional matters. So, yun yung mga characteristics that I hope are present in our organizations. So just to recap, it has to be safe and developmental. It has to be physically safe, psychologically safe, and there has to be a very clear philosophy that guides or animates yung ating leadership, yung professional development, as well as our mentorship aspects in our organization. So I hope that that helps everyone. And so yun, maraming salamat.
Thank you so much, Kevin. And thank you so much, everyone, for listening. John, I'll turn it back over to you.
Hey, thank you, Nikki and Kevin. Grabe, nakakatuwa. Isang domain pa lang ng well-being yung ating pinag-uusapan. No? Nandun pa lang tayo sa character o yung tinatawag natin na psychological well-being. So at this point, I want you to start thinking about those 4 tips. Kasi ayaw natin na hihinto lang tayo dun sa, wow, ang ganda naman nung napakinggan natin kay Kevin or kay Nikki, no? So we want you to write and take note. Ano ba yung mga tips na pinaka nag-resonate sa inyo? So we talked about strengths, we talked about hope, we talked about psychological safety, and we also talked about the power of mentoring, di ba? Or mentorship from what Kevin was able to discuss. Take this moment to think about ano yung kumapit sa inyo, write it on a piece of paper, and then start thinking about it again later. Kasi, you know, all of this learning will not be for anything if you will not apply it afterwards, di ba? Ang sabi nga natin, learning is 10% formal learning, 20% peer learning, and 70% experiential. And if this is not applied, then hanggang dun lang kayo sa 10% and sayang yung opportunity and time that you have spent with us today if you're not going to use it. All right? So please make sure to write some of those down while I am introducing our second speaker, which is one of my closest friends in the world. So si Kay Vardelion. Let me share my slides again. Yan. So si Kay, we come a long way, no? Like we've been friends for almost 2 decades now. So Kay is a registered psychologist. She is a PAP certified specialist in counseling and assessment psychology, and she's also the co-founder of Child Fam's Possibility Psychosocial Services, where she holds clinic hours offering services in counseling, psychotherapy, psychiatric consultation, psychological assessment, and workshop facilitation. And she's very passionate about work with persons with mood disorders, survivors of abuse and trauma, persons with non-chemical addictions, and children of addicts and individuals needing inner child work. We've ang dami ng pinagdaanan nitong taong to from the time that we have been friends since we were in UST in college. She used to be one of my guidance counselors when I was still a freshman in UST taking up behavioral science, and now we are both entrepreneurs and we are pushing for causes that talk about employee well-being and also mental health. So, hello, Kay, and thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you so much, John. And hello, good afternoon, everyone. I love the fact that we are going to talk about connectedness, and we just introduced a 2-decade-long connection.
Yes.
Which I would dare say no is really a big part of my personal resilience, also being part of your social group and our social group. And I think that is something that a lot of our participants would resonate with. And I want to say congratulations to Positive Workplaces, no, Nikki and John, for this endeavor on really looking out for what are the key factors that promote Filipino employees' well-being, because this is something that's very much needed, not just now actually, but has been always a priority, but is only gaining ground right now. So I'm very pleased to have the fourth C, the other C, second pala, the second C. No, kanina we talked about character with Kevin and Nikki. But for my end, I'm going to talk about connectedness. And this connectedness is something that is relatively broad. No, we're going to talk about a lot of the things that we have an attachment to. This can be our connectedness to our faith, to God. This can be connectedness to a purpose or calling. I heard Nikki and Kevin shared a bit about that earlier. It can also be connectedness to our coworkers, to our peers, no, creating a culture where belonging is nurtured in an organization. And yes, I don't think it can be a discussion about Filipino well-being without talking about connectedness within the family system that we have. So I hope this is something that excites you. It's very exciting for me as well. I know there is a formal Q&A at the end, but at any point in time you feel like you would like to ask a question, make a comment, share something, please do so. If I can find a way to integrate it in the discussion, that could work as well. So we don't have to wait until the end if you like, para I can better align the discussion to what is interesting to you, because this is a relatively broad topic. So, with that in mind, let's get going. I'm going to start with, maybe, I'm not sure if this is a controversial statement for you, but it's a potentially controversial statement that resilience. We all know resilience. This is a buzzword, no, especially now that mental health is something that's prioritized. Resilience exists within a relationship. In fact, there is a family therapist who studied family resilience by the name of Walsh, who dared say it is not individuals who are resilient, but rather it is people who are in relationships that are resilient. Now, before you have violent reactions, this is not talking about just romantic relationships. No, it's not just about being connected to a couple system, but rather when we talk about resilience existing within a relationship, it requires a connection to some sort. Like when we think about how human beings are programmed, if you want to use that word, no, even from the very beginning, as a baby, as a child, we require an attachment to a caregiver, to a parent figure. At the very young age where we are dependent on everybody else for our needs, it is actually the family, no, the parents, the caregivers that we have that provides us some form of security, so we can figure out who we are as well as what we can do, how far can we go, what are the dangers that we have to watch out for. In fact, if you have children, for those who have children, you may have noticed that they learn to smile because we smile with them. They learn that it's okay to go traveling far and discover things because they know they can always come back to you. There is some security in that relationship. In fact, this programming is even um, very evident as a child gets a little older. At the age of 2, we all develop, or generally, most neurotypical children developed empathy at a young age of 2, no? Pag may nakita ang isang bata na umiiyak, lalapit yan at magtatanong siya, bakit? Anong nangyari? Or would provide some sign of comfort. In fact, I have a 3-year-old. I remember I was having a very, very bad day at work and I was crying. Lapit siya sa akin, tapos dala-dala niya yung ano niya, feeding bottle, no? Yung siguro as a child, in-associate niya yung umiiyak, kailangan ng dede. Sabi niya, Mommy, it's okay. And then gave me the feeding bottle, no? And that shows us that it's innate in us to connect. When a person says they're a self-survivor, like I had to do this all alone, no, I had to be resilient by myself, I had no one to support me, it's actually possible that some people do find that inner strength to get through the day on their lonesome. But at some point, they would have to connect because something dies within you, in a manner of speaking, if you are isolated, if you're an island. Like your ability to feel things, to adjust yourself to other people, to discover the joy of a shared positive emotion, all of those things are somewhat lost if we are isolated. And this is why connection is a very, very important thing. In fact, a survey that we have done has shown that among the top 3 coping resources of Filipinos in general for stress, right up there is prayer and faith. And yeah, I heard no na this is something very unique to us Filipinos, especially because Western countries are very careful about being politically correct. They don't want their organization to espouse one religion or faith over another. It's difficult to find that middle ground for inclusivity. But the fact remains that, especially during this pandemic, a lot of Filipinos relied on their faith. And this can be a faith in a higher power, it can be a faith in a God, or simply faith in a purpose, a higher purpose, a reason why things are happening. And this makes sense because we know it's a good coping resource to focus on things you can control. But we've had a lot of experiences of things we cannot control. And what do you do with things that you cannot control? No, people will say you just accept it, you just have to be resigned to it. Like it's beyond your control. It is what it is. No, wala na tayong magagawa. But the prayer and faith aspect of our spirituality actually tells us that there's a third option aside from accepting and being resigned to things we can't control. And it's to surrender. Surrender to faith, to the belief, to the hope that things could be better, that there is a reason why something is happening in the first place. We also know that for Filipinos, the connection to our friends, our family, our loved ones is really a top coping resource. This is consistent with studies even overseas. Studies have said time and time again that if one person has just one connection where they can be themselves with this person, they feel free to be vulnerable, they can share even the things that are shameful or difficult to admit. No, there's safety in this relationship. They are already protected from mental health challenges compared to someone who does not. Of course, in the top three, not related to our discussion, but for your info, because it's also interesting and very Filipino. Number three, right there, is watching Netflix and YouTube videos. So we're not really much into the emotion focused coping. We're really more into relational and a lot of distraction related coping. But yeah, relational is very, very much right there at the top. And so, one of the questions that I want to ask as we spend our time together is, why are connections important to well-being? No, and this is across the board. This is not just talking about employees. This is talking about people in general. I love what Nikki said, no, about looking at the person as a whole individual rather than as a worker, as a machine, as a transactional piece, no, but rather as a person. And I guess this aspect of well-being places that whole person in his context, no, in his or her context. Why do we need to look a person in the context, in the connections that they have? And why is it more particularly important for there to be synergy between a person's work life, right? What is happening at our jobs, at our vocations, our career, as well as the other aspects of our well being, like the social, spiritual, and even communal aspects of our well being. To answer that question, we need to, I guess, define first. I'm sure you have a fair idea what synergy is, but let's first define what work life synergy means. I like work life synergy as opposed to the old concept of work life balance, because we have always touted work life balance, but I think people are starting to now realize how work life balance is an ideal that cannot be met. Sige nga po sa chat box very quickly. On the average, how many hours a day do you typically go to work or spend at work? Including maybe your overtime or including bringing homework if you have to 9, sabi ni Archer, okay, 10, sabi ni Marie, 10. Wow. Traffic also going to and work 9. Okay. May mga 9, may mga 10, 10 to 11, sabi ni Nicole. I saw at 12. Wow. Okay. At sabi ng scientist, anong ilang oras daw kayo dapat matulog for a healthy life? How many hours of sleep should you be sleeping? Diba? 8 to 9. O, sabihin na natin, ano, you work 10 hours a day, you have to sleep 8 hours a day, 18. Ilang oras lang ba meron sa isang araw? 24. That gives you barely 6 hours to do your personal hygiene, take care of your children, exercise, have hobbies, even prepare for your family time, etc., etc. Like, as a work-life balance implies there's a scale and that they have to be all equal. Netflix, etc. is 6 hours. Tama, Leia. Depende sa kung Korean novela ba yan or series no, na kailangan mong sundan. Pwede, no? Pwedeng umabot siya ng 6 hours. I just binge watch Wednesday. I don't know. And I'm looking forward to that 90s show. Anyway, so yun, so it really isn't balance out when you look at the sum total. So you think about it more, I suppose, in terms of synergy. Synergy means whether or not the work and the personal life of a person interacts in a positive way and cooperates and creates harmony out of their combined existence. Meaning they do not toggle, they do not conflict with one another. In fact, arguably, they may even create more when they are combined together than they would if they were existing independently or individually. Ibig sabihin, parang there's a richness to life. There is thriving because your work and your life are aligned in a very, very nice way. Like one of my favorite stories, I remember giving a stress management seminar in a government institution. And one of the surveys I did was I asked them to do a pie chart no, to decide ano yung ideal distribution mo of time if you had the power to design it exactly the way you want it. And how does it compare to your actual distribution of how you spend your day? And almost all of the participants, lagi, no, kulang na kulang yung personal life compared sa work life. Like, it's a source of frustration how much work eats their life, no? Except for one participant who, even from his disposition, kita mong masayang masaya siya with his life, no? This is a maintenance person who was very happy to share na, life was simple for him. From the very beginning, he decided that what's important for him is to send his son to school. Like, when they got married, he sat his wife down and said, "We will do what we can around this goal, send him to college." And because his work currently is doing that, and in fact, the child is about to graduate, so they're about to recover their couple time, napakasaya niya, no? Parang everything else na hindi aligned doon sa goal na yon, hindi na niya ini-entertain. And that simple alignment of values, right, between work and life created that greater sense of well-being for this person. And so maybe that's what we're looking at. We need not have balance. What we can do is to look at whether or not they are in alignment with one another. Sorry. And speaking of work-life alignment, anytime you hear a 2-year-old talking in the background, that is my toddler, no, speaking out. All right. Why is it important for us to have synergy across the different areas of our life? Well, we know that work and life feed one another. Like, for most of us, bakit ba tayo nagtatrabaho? Maybe you can share in the chat box, no? Para kanino ka bumabangon? What is the reason why you are at work? And if you're like most people, it's usually because you want to give your family the best, right? Or you want to be able to join in a outing with your friends, no? You want to be able to enjoy the things typical of your age group to do, no? Family advocacy. Thank you, Jan, no? For some of us, yeah, no, for sustenance, for dignity, to earn a living, our life is fed by the work that we do. And in families, like, we raise our children so that they will become not naman productive workers, but productive members of society. We want our life, our family, to be stable enough so that when we raise our children, we are raising them to be people of values, of character. And so, in a way, hindi siya magkahiwalay, no? Yung prinsipyo mo, I love what Kevin shared about the OVP vision there, no? Yung prinsipyo mo bilang empleyado, prinsipyo mo rin yan para ipalakihin yung pamilya mo. They are not separated when you think about it in that way. No, Julina is sharing to retire healthily and happily while contributing to the community. So, di ba, kung ang goal mo is to retire healthily, tapos yung work mo, binibigyan ka ng chronic stress. So, hindi siya aligned, no? Parang naghihintay pa ba ako na pagurin ko yung sarili ko before I can take care of my health. It doesn't seem to work out. It is a lot healthier to have the two of them in synchronicity, no? But also, it's important for there to be synergy because work and life diffuses burdens and creates positive emotions. What do I mean by diffuses burden? If something is really just the sole focus of your life, have you ever experienced that? Yung meron kang attachment figure, could be a love life, no? Ito lang, itong taong lang ang tinututukan ng buhay ko, wala nang iba. When something negative happens in that relationship, it's as if there is nothing else that is left worth living for. And in a way, it's the same with work. If there is no connectivity to a higher purpose, to a God, to friendships, to family, and something doesn't work out at work, or work no longer satisfies us. Remember, people change. Like, you could hit midlife and all of a sudden, this isn't interesting or meaningful to me anymore. There has to be something else that would make you want to still get up in the morning. If not as an additional purpose, then even just a reason to rest. One of the things that are being advocated for increased energy is just mindful focus attention on different things. Like quality time with family doesn't need to be a lot of time. Like you don't need to spend like a whole weekend for vacation out of town. You only need to sit down for 10 minutes mindfully with your family, not thinking of anything else. If you want gardening to be your stress management activity, you don't need to garden the whole day. You only need to do so for a few minutes, but you're not thinking of anything else. That is what is meant by diffusing burdens, because the activity you do outside of work allows you to temporarily set aside the burdens you're carrying and then give you opportunity to generate more positive emotions to replenish the stress caused by work if there is. Remember the magic ratio, di ba, of 5:1? Na sana meron tayong 5 positive emotions, every one that's unpleasant for us. So it diffuses and therefore that helps create greater resilience in the long term. But also, lastly, this is important because the goal of development is really to integrate you as a person. Like all of us, we are, shall we say, naturally chaotic at the beginning without reflection. But as we become more self aware, the better we can integrate our person. Integrate meaning your personal goals and your work goals eventually will become one. Because it differs. Siguro yung goals ko nung single ako, nung wala akong anak, ibang-iba dun sa goals ko at this stage of my life where I'm raising a little girl. Like dati, okay ako, you can make me work 6 days a week, 7 days a week. Ngayon, bahala kayo, I'm going to take the break, no? To take care of my child. I'm not as ambitious as I used to be. Sometimes that causes a frustration, but it's the reflection of that integration that's very, very important. And unless you have connection, unless you have a way of processing that, a spirituality to process that, this is something very difficult to do. All right. So how can we do this? No? So what are the aspects of connectedness that supports well-being that we can look at? Ayan. Thank you, Serena, for the heart emoticon. There are three that we're looking at. This is the connection to a higher power or a higher purpose. That's your spirituality. It's connection to maybe friends or a group that you feel you belong to. That's your community. And of course, it's your connection to your family. No, sa Filipino, dalawa yan. It's your family of origin. That's your parents. And your family of procreation. That's your spouse, your children, and we're all one extended family, no, at the end of the day. So, I want to invite you at this juncture to maybe explore with me what are the characteristics that make a healthy connection. And this is a connection to whoever or to a higher power or to your family. But I just want to do a quick survey of what are the different characteristics of a healthy connection before I give some practical tips on how we can nurture such a connection. So let's do this anonymously. You know the drill, no, Menti. One option you can do is you can open a browser or open a tab on your different device. Just type menti.com. You can enter the code 81334866. Other option is to maybe just take a shot of the QR code so it will redirect you to the link. Or there is a hyperlink in the chat box that you can look at. So I'll give you some time. Maybe when you're there, what you can do is click on the heart icon at the bottom. Oh, you're here already. Very nice. So that I could have a sense of how many is in the Zoom room already. All right. Perfect. Yan, I see 39, 40. Very good. I love how quickly you respond. Ayan, very nice. 42. Ayan. Okay. So I'm gonna give you two options. You can reflect about, in general, how are your connections? So in general na to, no, maybe later in the privacy of your room when you're doing your journaling, you can segment it further to friendship, work relationships, family relationships, community, church, wherever. But for now, let's make it general, just so we could have a reflection of what we're looking at. Okay. So I have 50 here. All right. Let's see. There you go. Pwede pang humabol just in case I moved the slide already and that you are not yet in the Menti page. The other option is just use the chat box. If it's difficult for you to connect, you can PM me the response or you can share it publicly. Okay. Good relationships, when there are problems, closes ranks rather than disengages. So this is self-explanatory. It means that when there are problems, do you come together? Like think of a family, for example. Pag may problema, naglalapit-lapit ba kayo? Pinag-uusapan niyo siya anong pwedeng gawin? Or in a team, for example, at work, do you um, try to problem solve and say, okay, I think something did not work in this particular project that we are doing. What are the things that we can do about it? Because the unhealthy part is disengage, no? People just go their own way. And one of the most dysfunctional families, for example, is the disengaged family. Yung ang disengaged family, yung parang border ka lang sa bahay, no? Yung kanya-kanya kayong kwarto, tapos siya nagko-computer siya doon, ikaw may ginagawa ka dito, and then nagkikita-kita lang kayo, no? Kasi kukunin niyo na yung baon. So there's a lack of connection. So closest ranks is a very, very important aspect of a healthy relationship. I'm glad that majority said yes, their connections close rank. Disengage, merong 5. So you can consider this as a reflection prompt, maybe what can be done. Okay, here's another. A good relationship or a healthy, um, I was told no by my mentor that pangit to call relationships, especially family, as good or bad. Kasi there's no good or bad family. We just say healthy and unhealthy because like anything unhealthy, it just needs support to be worked on rather than calling it a bad relationship, except lang for certain toxic, abusive relationships. But in general, a lot of things can be reflected on that we can work on. So this is related to the other one. When you say reflects, there is an intentional effort to figure out one, no, what is the actual cause of a positive event or a negative event. And when we say actual cause, there is a reflection on nag-contribute din ba ako dun sa problema o nag-contribute din ba ako sa solution? Or is the problem caused by something outside of the system? Like it just is, no? It just is. Like one of the things that's very challenging for our team to deal with lately are the massive layoffs that's happening. We know that there's a global recession coming up. Magkano na ang sibuyas sa inyo? 300 per kilo. Magkano sibuyas sa inyo, no? So we know that there's a lot of stressors. Thank you, Leia, for that note, saying that it's relevant, no? So reflection is, ano ba yung nangyayari? Kasi baka nag-aaway kami, wala naman sa amin yung problema. It just so happened that the stress from the outside is so extreme that the family dynamics or the group dynamics, the team dynamics is not yet mature enough to deal with that particular problem. That is a very important reflection to make. The opposite is projection, blaming. Ikaw kasi. Kaya tayo nagkakaganito kasi sinabi ko na naman sa'yo, mag-ipon ka, hindi ka nag-iipon. Or sinabi ko na naman sa'yo, magagalit si boss kapag hindi ka nag-overtime. Ayan, no? O, synergy na, tama si Kenny. Synergy na kasi mahirap talagang mag-work balance, no? And you know what? It works. It works. If you only spend like 10 or 15 minutes on other aspects of your life, like prayer, it could work. I have other tips later, no? Yeah, okay. Um, this one is another aspects of relationship that you can look at. And this one doesn't have right or wrong. Um, so does your relationship, your connections focus more on feelings or task? And I'm forcing you to choose, but in reality, it should be a healthy mix of both. It should not be just about task. It should not be just about feelings. So it's very important to have friends, for example, ask you how you are, how you feel. Your coworkers to also check in on you. No, ano ba nangyayari, kamusta ka na? Especially if there are a lot of changes happening in the workplace or you are all working from home and isolated still. Somebody got ill, no, COVID na naman, 'di ba? Ayaw natin ng puro task, no? Like what Nikki said, it's very transactional if everything is just about deadlines. Sana doon sa email meron man lang, hi, no, kamusta ka na? But also, you don't want it to be overly focused on feelings, that there is no pressure, right? In psychologically safe environments, it's safe enough to exert pressure for people to be the best version of themselves. It's not so relaxed na sobrang safe, nothing gets challenged anymore. And in families, 'di ba, sabi nga nila, hindi naman ako mapapakain ng I love you, lalo na tumataas ang presyo ng ng sibuyas. So kailangan meron ding anong gagawin natin, no? Who gets to do what? How do we delegate the tasks in our family so that things get done? It's very important, no? Support system, as Rachel said. Ayan, okay. How about this one? Yan. This applies to families also, to friendships also, to work situations. Are there strong leadership in that family or is there a power struggle, especially in crisis? Ayan, no? Pag crisis ba, ayan, nagtuturuan sino yung in charge, nag-aaway kung sino masusunod o kaya nawawala na lang, no, lahat kung sino yung in charge. So it's very important that our work, our teams, our families also have strong leadership. There is no such thing as a purely democratic family. Parents, for example, would have to take charge. Sometimes it's not functional or it's not doable. Like if the parents are overburdened or has an illness or is overseas, but definitely it's helpful if in the family there is some leadership, even if the leadership gets rotated or shared along the way. One of my favorite things related also to psychological safety, ayan, in your family, in your teams, in your friendship, meron bang, and that should be unconditional. Unconditional positive regard, ibig sabihin, tatanggapin kita, maging sino ka man. I will appreciate you even if you are doing something that I don't approve of. Like I can disagree with the behavior, but not who you are. I can focus on your strengths. I can love you while correcting you. I can accept the different aspects of who you are, your religion, your gender orientation, your religion, your political affiliation, your preferences in a whole lot of things. So there's that inclusivity that's very respectful as opposed to a very rigid system na hindi pwedeng magkamali, no? That's a non-safe environment. Okay, last one, para we can go to some of the tips also. Ayan, a good team, relationship, family is also thinking of other systems around it, no? So, yung organization nyo, sana nakikinetwork din sa iba. Sana yung organization nyo do outreaches also. Your family also talks to the neighbors. You know, one of the researches that we had on families with financial difficulties, it's really those who know their neighbors that survive the best. Kahit wala kang pera, kung marunong kang mangapit bahay, you know how to ask for help, you know who everybody else is, you are actually better off mental health wise, no? In any crisis you will survive. Kilala mo yung kung sino yung nasa barangay nyo, kilala nyo kung sino yung malalapitan in case there's a problem, as opposed yun sa us versus them, no? Tayo lang, and everybody else is a competition. So that actually just creates an energy that's negative. It's really pushing people into a sense of feeling threatened all the time rather than belonging to a higher community. All right. So I hope this is helpful. Maybe you can let me know if there is a insight that you got from this section. Ayan. In the chat box, no, if it was something that's helpful for you. So very last, I'll if you want the PowerPoint, all of these questions are also here. I'll send this to you. But very quickly before we end, how can you nurture connectedness, even if the high work demands no limit it? And these are some practical things that we can do. Okay. One of my favorite is this one. Ask your loved ones, your friends, what is the minimum that you can give them to make them feel loved. I borrowed this from Boyatsis. Minsan mataas kasi yung expectation natin. Kailangan mapasyal ko yung anak ko. Kailangan mabili ko siya ng ganitong bagay. Like I remember I used to feel like the only way I can give my mom the best is I can buy her a house, no? But if you sit your loved ones down and just ask them, ano yung pinaka-minimum na pwede kong ibigay para maramdaman mo na mahal kita, you can focus on that. Because for all you know, what they want is to just sit with you in the dinner table without cell phones and just have quality time with them. And if you concentrate your energy, your limited time on that minimum, everything else that comes from that is extra. No, so ask the minimum and make it strategic. Focus on that which matters to the person you want to give that to. Go for mindful tense. What's mindful tense? Do things you love that connects you to the outside world for 10 minutes straight. So do your gardening, do your prayers, do your journaling, do your spending time with your spouse, no, for 10 minutes a day without thinking of anything else. And for all you know, no, you would enjoy it so much that this will become a battery of several 10 minutes a day until it becomes a habit. Kahit nga yung exercise, hindi nyo masimulan, mag-weights kayo ng 10 minutes a day. That could be very simple that you can do. Okay, a few more, no? Systematize asking for help, especially in teams, in organizations. Good connections are those that support each other. So if there is a way that you can make a system out of asking for help, like have maybe a round robin during meeting, or who here needs help. Ayan, malaking tulong yan. Agree daw si Gabby, no? Oo, maraming 10 minutes videos, even walking videos that you can find on YouTube. Ayan. Another favorite of mine, combine areas of life that you can combine para kahit konti lang yung oras mo, connected ka pa din. For example, can you combine family time and spirituality? Yes, no, you can pray together, you can go to church together. Can you combine friendship and say exercise? Of course you can. You can exercise with your friends, go mountain climbing. Can you combine, say, work and spirituality, yes, no, you can have Bible sharing, you can have prayer meetings. If your company is inclusive, you can have ecumenical prayer ceremonies. No, yung ibig sabihin, there it doesn't have to be religious at all, or it can be a common time you write your mission statements. So pwede mo siyang i-combine ng sama-sama. Even environmental, di ba? Being connected to the environment, pwede mo siyang i-connect sa family time. No? Take your loved ones to the beach together or up the mountain top, or magtanim lang kayo together, no? And really just connect to nature. Those are things that are very, very helpful. I'll do last two para we can still have some Q&A. A nice tip that you can do is to turn towards instead of away. What is this? I borrowed this from Gottman, the Gottman Institute, which is a couple health institute. Turn towards instead of away means to recognize bids for connection. Ibig sabihin, any communication that is given to us, you can reflect if they're a bid for connection. Remember, everything is communication, even the things we don't say, just what we do. So if your partner, for example, would sigh, right? That can be a bid for connection. Like may hinihingi siya. Ano bang hinihingi niya? Is he asking for comfort? Is he asking you to ask no, how your day went? Pag sinabi niya, ang alat naman itong adobo na niluto mo, no? Minsan ang reaction natin, negative, no? Ikaw na magluto, di ikaw na, di pala masarap eh. But that can be a bid for connection. Like that is saying, ay hindi ba? Can you let me know how you like it so that we can cook it the way you like it the next time? Like there is an opportunity to turn a lot of the conversations into a opportunity if we are responsive instead of reactive. Ayan. And lastly, ayan, may mga iba pa ba? I'll let you think about it. But this is the really spiritual one. This is an Ignatian exercise for the fans of Ignatian spirituality. Just do a reflection every day of where did you feel God's presence the most during the day? Or if you're not a theist, where did you feel love's presence the most in the day? And if you make a habit of that, then you can figure out where the connectedness in the whole universe is at that moment. So with that, thank you very much. And I hope this was a helpful discussion for you.
Okay, thank you so much, Kay. Grabe, alam mo, kala ko konti lang matututunan ko sa iyo ngayon kasi like kilalang kilala na kita. Alam mo yon, like we've been friends for a long time. But you still surprise me so much because there are a lot of things. Actually, I was taking notes. I was taking notes while you were discussing, and there are so many things that I wanted to apply, especially from the house that you mentioned, no? Like dun sa latter part. And even yung comparisons ng like what connections are. I guess like at this point, I would like to invite the audience to start thinking about your questions. You have a good number of experts here in the room. So you have Nikki, who's a well-being expert. You have Kevin, who's also a human resources and human strategy expert. And you have Kay, who is an expert in psychosocial well-being. So please, yan, shinare na. Sino yung nag-share? Si Gabby? Is this Gabby? Or Nikki?
Yes, John.
Ayan. So Gabby shared already the Pigeonhole app. So all you have to do is to scan the QR code o kaya also click the chat box. Tapos you can start asking questions para depending on who has an answer to it from our pool of experts today, then we can have them give you some tips and guidance from those questions as well. So remember, we talked about two very important things today, two domains of well-being. The first one is character, or what we call psychological well-being. And na-discuss yun ni Nikki and ni Kevin, and they gave you some tips like strengths, hope, psychological safety, and also mentoring. And then on Kay's part, we discussed naman the idea of connectedness. So we talked about different types of connections, like from your teams, from your family, from a higher being. Ano sa tingin nyo yung makakatulong sa inyo na area of those domains of well-being? So please let us know your questions. And again, you can use the pigeonhole to ask those questions so that we can answer them. Sige, while we are waiting, ako na munang magbibigay ng question. Ayun na, meron na. So you don't have to wait anymore. So I guess let's take this question muna. Like this, I think this is a very common challenge in government and also in other organizations. So how do you deal with a narcissistic boss or colleague? Kasi you have this, alam mo yon, hindi nawawala tong mga tao na to sa workplace, 'di ba? So how do you deal with them? Because I'm sure they affect your well-being in different ways. Who wants to take a stab at this? Anyone?
I'll try.
I'll go, Kev.
Okay. Well, number one, it depends where that person is in the organizational structure. Medyo mahirap pag siya yung pinaka-head ng agency. I think that's the most challenging. Kasi usually, let's say it's your one up. So what you can do, approach HR. So that's one. Approach HR and ask for help, especially if the feedback is recurring, no? And there are some leaders kasi if this is a consistent behavior, there will definitely be a lot of issues concerns. So you can approach yung HR kasi that's actually one of HR's roles, to be the bridge and try to address all of these workplace issues. The second is, although you have to do this with some care, is approach that person's higher up. But it depends on the situation in the organization. In some, there will be, kunyari ako, if I had certain challenges with other heads, what I would do is ask for help muna sa aking supervisor, and then that supervisor will talk to the supervisor of that person, and then that supervisor will intervene and provide support. Minsan, there are some institutions as well that have certain mechanisms na not necessarily at the level of grievance, but you can provide anonymous feedback to the top management so that they could address certain issues. So there are, actually sa amin, we had all of those mechanisms in place. But pag hindi na talaga, I mean, for example, it's not someone that would exit the organization. So what you can do sometimes is really just to find workarounds. Na if as much as possible, you can proceed with doing something without having to go through that person, then try to do it. And then hopefully you can find or convince them to behave otherwise. But siguro ang pinaka-realization ko, hindi talaga lahat ay mako-convince mo to cooperate. But don't take it as something na pagkukulang mo. I think that's the worst thing that you can do. That, okay, I can't change this person, so I blame myself. I think that's one of the worst things that you can do. So sometimes you just say, okay, balik tayo dun sa work and just try and focus on it.
All right. Thank you so much, Kevin, for that. I saw a very interesting, those are very practical tips, by the way, Kevin. I would have done the same thing if I were in your position. This is a very interesting question that maybe I'd like to throw to Nikki. Nikki, ano ang dapat mong gawin kapag ang lahat ay nasa iisang paninindigan kahit mali? This is I want to just, I know this may not be like something that you are exposed to immediately, and I know that Kevin and Kay can also weigh in on this, but I would love to hear what you think about this as from a person who probably is not part of this bubble.
Oh man, this is so tricky. So I have to take this with a grain of salt because I don't fully understand the situation or the context behind this question. So for me talaga, it's really tricky. Like taking care of your whole well-being, the character domain of your well-being means being aligned with your values. And sometimes to be aligned with your values means may makakabangga ka talaga sa mga nakakatrabaho mo. I think this is part of the reason why I left government, was because I knew there were some misalignments with my values and those of the people around me. So, yung advice sa akin at that time when I was much younger, which I took, was, Nikki, do your best to understand everything now. And when you have more power and influence, that's when you can come back. But again, take it with a grain of salt, because that was advice to me when I was younger in government, and I saw na hindi align yung values namin. So if I could not fight the culture given the influence that I had at that time, maybe someday when I have more influence, I could come back. And in a way, I think positive workplaces working with government is our comeback these days.
I love that. Thank you so much. I didn't mean to ambush you with that question, but I feel that a fresh perspective would really help. I love your idea na maybe this is not the time. Alam mo yun? Maybe this is not your time if you don't have that level of influence yet to try to reverse the tide. Pero once you have enough influence, take it, di ba? But yeah, I would like to hear also Kevin and Kay's take on that. Kasi like, especially Kevin, you've worked with the government, and Kay, ikaw, I'm sure you've been exposed to different government agencies. Kay, sige, ikaw, let's start with you.
Oh, that's a tough one, And I want to echo Nikki's na I'm answering the question just from the data that's in the question, so I don't know the context of it, so it's not advice or anything. You have to really discern if you want to stay and then fight for it. Fighting could just be being steadfast with your values, like refusing to participate or take part in something that you feel is not morally correct, or being an active change maker. But understand that once you make the choice, that is a big stress, and you may not always get what you want. Like at some point, yung idealism mo has to be matched with some, any system would resist, diba? It's harder to change organizations vis-a-vis individuals. But if you feel like it's not gonna help you well-being wise, it's not gonna make a dent where you are because you don't have yet the resources or the position, you can do what Nikki said, which is disengage, and then figure out how you can advocate for your values later on. But if you're in a position of some power like HR or OD, I think the best way for this is really to onboard the new ones in such a way that you get them boundaries from systems that don't work. Right? Like the new people are really um exposing them kasi agad to an old system, and then making them the one adjust to the old would be a challenge. But if you can work on new people and then help them be the change makers, that might be a better approach until you can find a champion from way up.
Yeah, thank you so much for that, Kay. And ikaw, Kevin, like especially since I'm sure you must have experienced a lot of this with your government track record, no?
Yeah, I think I was lucky because actually our change leaders were the top. No, I came from an organization where it was actually the top management that really wanted to reform and make sure that there was alignment in terms of values. These were things na VP Lenny herself would always repeat in very candid tone during our flag ceremonies to make sure na she models the behavior that she expects from everyone. So yun nga, babalik dun sa hindi lang pwedeng mahusay, dapat matino. But from my personal experience, you have to be strategic about it, no? There are things that I would push for which may not be within the priority or may clash with certain values. So I agree with Nikki na kailangan alam mo sa sarili mo ano yung non-negotiables mo. I also agree with Kay na hindi naman pwedeng ipaglalaban mo to the point na naubos ka na. I mean, that's also the reason why there are a lot of talented and good people who are leaving government. Nilaban ng nilaban, napagod, naubos, umalis. So ultimately, hindi mo na nga nabago yung sistema na wala pa yung mga tao that you could pin your hopes to. No? So yun yung third is, you have to be systematic about it. So one of the things that we tried to do was, can we design our systems in such a way that it won't change as much if people change? Kasi magbabago yung tao. But there are certain mechanisms. I mean, the Constitution is one of those mechanisms, di ba? So, what types of internal constitutions in the organization can we make? That if you want to really have your way, you have to go through the entire difficult process of changing that internal constitution. So, introducing checks and balances and making sure that you reinforce the values. I mean, ayun, babalik ako, hindi talaga 100% ay makakasundo mo or makaka-align mo ng values. But find champions that would make sure that they would support you and also they would sustain those initiatives even after you.
Yeah, thank you, Kevin. So knowing your core, di ba? Like knowing your core is very important kasi it clarifies what are your negotiables and non-negotiables. But at the same time, also knowing who you are similar with in terms of those core values para you don't feel alone then, di ba? Like you don't feel alone and you know who will fight behind you or beside you if in case you really want to change things, you know, in that organization. I will pick this last question because we don't have that much time and I want to be respectful of people's time as well. But I think this is very relevant to a lot of people. My question dito, is it really okay to cut off connections which started healthy but eventually turned sour along the way? Is it even worth reviving or saving? Yeah. So anyone who wants to take this one, please go ahead.
I think
Yes.
Kay, our connectedness expert, can also weigh in on this. Pero kayo, Kay, Kevin.
Yeah, it's actually okay to break off connections in certain circumstances. Abuse is one, right? Like at any point, the line is there and it's crossed. You have to disengage, and there's nothing wrong with you if you disengage. If the relationship is, for some reason, even if both of you are good natured and you're trying and it's not working, you may have to give it a rest for a bit before you re engage, right? Or it's affecting your well being. What's not healthy is to disengage and let the anger and resentment eat at you because it's such a sharp cut off that there's no reflection over what happened. Minsan sa umpisa, you have to, medyo madrama to ha, minsan sa umpisa, kung di kaya, you have to cut off in anger. Pero over the course of time, you have to process that anger, right? And maybe figure out, okay, what was helpful in this connection, what was not helpful, what contributed to what happened, what didn't contribute. Kasama yan doon sa isang question na may doon sa your partner cheated, di ba? Meron bang kailangan na i-figure out and then move from there. Like, okay, from my reflection, I felt like it's proper to reconnect. It's proper to just keep away. It's proper to just work on myself. But yeah, you can just that it doesn't make you a better person. I think is what I want to say. No, disconnect, but make it that it's healthy for you also, rather than it damages you further.
Right. Thank you so much, Kay. That is so helpful and very discerning, no? Like on what type of relationships you can cut and maybe not cut, but just rest. Alam mo yun, until you can start to, you're ready to process it. Kevin, ikaw, meron ka bang insight dito sa very important question?
Yeah, for me, yes. I mean, ultimately, babalik ako ano ba yung non-negotiable ko eh. And if your non-negotiable is yun nga, I think for a lot of us, we always talk about non-negotiables in terms of values. We forget that our well-being, our personal well-being should also be a non-negotiable for us. But I also agree na there are different types of cutting off. sometimes actually time gives us the space, no, to really process everything that we went through, and then from there siguro after some time has passed, we're able to have this detachment from what actually what the emotions of what initially happened. Then we can make an assessment. What do we want to do now? Tapos na ba? Do we want to reconnect but with certain with stronger boundaries? And so just making sure na hindi lang siya yes or no, disconnect na ba o hindi, but what you do after.
Hi, thank you so much, Kevin, for that. I'm going to wrap this up because like I'm sure there are a lot more questions, and you can see in the pigeonhole na marami pa pong questions. But what we're going to do with this, and this is what we promise you all, no? Because ang daming questions namin na nakokolekta. We are collecting these questions, tapos we are planning to do a segment in our social media channels wherein we would have experts answer them in short videos. Para you can, pa TikTok style ba mo yun? Para you can get some possible insights from those responses. And you can have them in short bursts of information para it doesn't feel like overwhelming for you. So, ikikeep namin to. Pasensya na kung hindi namin siya masagot because we also want to make sure that everyone gets to go home, especially if they are still in the office and it's already 5 o'clock. Again, we would like to give this as a gift to everyone who's attending. May copy po kami ng presentation ng Filipino Employee Wellbeing Summit in day 1. And we will be sharing that in the chat box, or you can also scan the QR code for this. Okay, you can also scan the QR code para you can download that presentation. That is in our website para po matulungan kayo so that it can be your possible presentation also to your management. So you can use it for possible well-being programs in the future. Meron pa po tayong day 3. Kung character and connectedness yung ating na-discuss for day 2, which is today. Day 8 po, day 3 po, ano ba ito? Nagugulo ako na. Day 3, we will talk about career. So si Ms. Rhea Gadi naman po ang ating guest. She used to be managing director for BDI, or Development Dimensions International. And we will also have positive emotions and play through gratitude and contentment. So contentment yung fourth na element of well-being or domain of well-being. And ang dito po is si Jericho Kapinpin at si Matthew C. So both of them are well-being coaches, and Gio is a Chief People Officer of Positive Workplaces. Please follow us in our social media channels. Sobrang dami pa po namin na tips at ang dami pa po namin pwedeng i-share sa inyo na information about well-being and well-being management. Kailangan po natin ito. Dito nyo rin po makikita yung mga free webinars na aming i-share pa po in the future, especially next year. So, I think that's it. We are now going to share our post-evaluation form in the chat box. And I also want to take this moment to thank our good friends Kevin and Kay for making this a very meaningful session. Ang dami po nating attendees today. I think we were able to hit around 240, going 250 attendees for this webinar. Marami po yun considering na konti lang po usually yung umaattend going end of the year, especially pagpapasko. And maraming salamat din po sa mga nag-arrange nito like si Gabby, si Kelly, and si Joyce who are here. They're our teammates. And Nikki, of course, for being one of our leads to make sure that this webinar is actually done. And maraming salamat po sa inyo kasi po you took the time to learn more about well-being, and also hopefully, sinasabi ko nga po kanina, mai-apply nyo po sana, no? Magamit nyo po, mai-apply nyo po kaagad yung inyong natutunan para po tuloy-tuloy po siyang maging kultura in your organizations. Kasi sobrang laki po ng power ng culture once na-create nyo na po yun sa inyong mga organizations. So again, nandyan po sa chat box yung ating post-evaluation forms. Please make sure to fill those out within 30 minutes. Okay? Within 30 minutes lang. Kasi po, doon lang po namin ibubukas yung post-evaluation form. Please make sure that you write your correct names and email address. para po tayo ay makareceive automatically ng inyong certificate of attendance. So thank you again everyone for being here and hope to see you on day 3, which would be on Thursday. Marami-rami po sana kayong maka-attend doon kasi po I think that's a holiday if I'm not mistaken. That's the Feast of the Immaculate Conception. So sana po makapaghatak pa kayo ng mga ibang tao in your organizations who could be champions like you when it comes to creating more healthy cultures of positivity in your organization. At matulungan niyo rin po kami sa aming mission na mag-co-create ng cultures that enhance the well-being of the Filipino workforce. So maraming salamat po and have a great afternoon everyone. Thank you so much Kay, thank you Kevin, Nikki, Gabby,